just to kick it off, because Stephen is new to this group and he doesn't know most of you, knows the Brentwood people.
Little middle group.
How many here have to file compliance reports, WC Pauls or unit stats? Okay.
There's like pretty good number.
Yeah, don't hold your breath, man. If you're in California, it might be coming soon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted to segue into is a lot of the states are pushing it now for the JPA markets and the SIGs. Florida, already doing it. We're already doing it in Massachusetts. I had to do a McDonald's group. We had to do their unit stats this year. So you're not safe. It's coming. And as we were talking earlier, for rate making purposes, if you're not reporting out there, your state is making these rates without you. And now your rates are going to be way up here, and you're going to have to discount the crap out of them, get them down to where you're selling them. So it might be a good thing. So we'll think about that. So we're going to talk a little bit about what NCCI is doing to all of us, because they change things every year. They give you a little bit of notice, but then they start docking you for it. So Stephen's here to talk about what is coming up this year, what has already come up this year, and what's coming up next year. And then we're going to start scoring this on. And then when we finish up, I've got a couple things that are connection specific. But wherever they overlap, I'll fill in saying, if you put it in this place, it will report properly. That's what I'm good for. So I'll turn it over to Stephen.
All right, I appreciate it. Well, nice to meet you all. Know a few people, like you said. So I guess the best thing would be to start with how these decisions are made. So when there's a change in the plan, how does that actually happen so that you know where you can go to look and find the same information we find? So you have the WCIO as the organization of a representative from NCCI and all the independent bureaus. And if you're in an independent bureau, you know exactly what one is. If you're not, congratulations. But they all get together, they make these changes, they publish them. The latest published was May 10th, I believe, this year. And it had some significant changes depending on what states you write in, how much business you write, some pretty large changes. And it ties pretty nicely into our earlier speaker's diagram over there. They're moving up the chain, and they're expecting us to move with them. So they want more data. They want it to make more sense, so better information. So kind of what's changing. So you have new injury types. Anyone in New York here? Writing in New York? All right, well, we can skip that one. But basically...
Yeah, you guys stay out of New York, right? Pennsylvania, they're close.
They're close. Well, this stuff tends to spread, and I'll tell you how it works. The WCIO, everyone gets a vote. New York usually leads the change. One of the fields we'll talk about later, New York wanted an entirely new record type. So, we have 1 through 6. They wanted to add 7 or 8 and make it an entirely new requirement. The consensus among everyone was add 1 field. So that's kind of how that works. But just because it's in New York now doesn't mean it won't be elsewhere later. Mm-hmm. We usually see that happen. And then the separate segment numbers. And this is something that's kind of spreading. It's at NCCI and California right now, if we have anyone that's in California. And what that is you have a separation of ownership. NCCI makes a ruling. They've split these two. You still have to report their data. They have to differentiate that. That's a new set of fields that we have to go back to our systems and make sure that we, A, have the data to track it, B, we're translating.
And is that going to apply to PEOs?
That's something that's hard to get an answer on these days.
Because we've got a couple PEO writers out here. So.
Oh yeah, I think definitely eventually, but right now it's mainly up in the air, really. First set of reports is going in. They're still figuring out, honestly, how to handle it, and just an overall feeling of a bureau. One of the things I'll mention on here gives you an idea. They don't always have it together as much as you think, so ask the questions, see what they can and can't answer. So that's a big one, and that's
a really good point to bring up, because we've had this a couple times.
Oh yeah.
And bringing up synergy on this. you get an independent bureau, the documentation is light if it exists at all, right? Because WCIO makes it super generic, right? So you're going to say, go get your WCPOLs or unit stat documentation, WCIO.org. It's written for down here, right?
Yeah.
It says, oh, and this applies to Pennsylvania. I'm like, I guess. We send it to Pennsylvania, they go, that's not what we wanted. So it's like, get a relationship with your bureaus. You guys have 4 independents you have to deal with. It's that northeast corner, they're all independent up there. So as long as you have a relationship with them, we can work with them. We'll say, hey, send a file. What do you want? Ask them what they want. Because half the time they'll say, oh, you've put it in this format. You're right. It's like, it doesn't say that anywhere. It's not documented. So
Right.
always ask.
And I would say that's the value our group adds is we've got those relationships. We've got the translations for each state because you're right, it's Pennsylvania, Delaware are always the same, but then North Carolina wants it different.
North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
North Carolina.
Yeah. One of our favorites.
Yeah. Michigan.
Oh, Michigan. Yeah. I think they're the last one without a website. They also don't send you a delinquency list. Like they're still, probably no one in here, but you used to have to do it by paper, and they're still on that system. So everything is paper with them.
And we do have Michigan writers here, so.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Then you know our pain. And then this is one that I wanted to share, and this, hopefully we're all doing this already, but the basis of deductible calculation, it used to not be required in Minnesota or North Carolina. Not just the way systems are usually written, you don't write out that function for 1 or 2 states. So we're probably all sending that, but you may start seeing more edits on that, more attention from those 2 bureaus, whereas before they were completely ignoring that field altogether. Chances are if you're doing it right in another few states, then you probably won't see much, but it's something new that we have to adjust to. And then the last thing is California. So does anyone write much in California?
Quite a few people who write a lot in California.
Okay. Well, I don't know how familiar you are with the remediation program or the data quality incentive program, but their drive in California right now is to improve the quality of the data coming through the door. They have an entire team of people. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, so they have an entire team of people that's running the data quality incentive program, and it has measures, and they have new measures. They've changed some measures, and a good example is large policies with no claims. It's something that happens legitimately, but very rarely, and depending on the system, you may or may not catch it before it goes to California, so they have a measure to give you a threshold. If you cross that threshold, 15% right now of your large policies, which if you're a smaller company, your larger policies are probably few and far between, so much as one might raise a question. Now, thankfully, right now, the threshold for being included in this program is quite high. So 100 policies or more in California, plus 35 million or more in written premium. But that's lowering pretty much as we go. So I don't know how low they'll go, but their intention is to include more and more as things get tighter and make more sense. So that's a new program, and along with that is submission timeliness, which we all know you're kind of fined based on that, so we're all focused on that already. And then edit failures that affect experience rating. Again, they're wanting better data, so they don't have to force that back on you. They want it right coming through the door.
Right. And when we talk about like submission time, luckily, early on we had to deal with a company in Utah. It wasn't even just you guys, but you understand Utah is the shortest and they find the most. Mm-hmm. So if we can get it, if we can at least appease Utah, we know we've got the rest of the country. So,
right.
So that's why like we do it weekly. We make sure everything's in there, and you do get them weekly because of that. Even though most states, Michigan, they don't need them for 45 days after the inception.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
not 9.
If only.
So if we get them by 9, we're good. So that's what we push to, is we strive to make sure that you guys get them, even if you don't submit them right away, and you sit on them and get them, clean them up, whatever. We want to make sure you have them in time, because we don't want Utah finding us, and then we don't want the other states, which are slowly dropping that date limit. As they come online, they want their data faster. Michigan is probably the slowest because, yes, they are still taking paper. So they have data entry issues to keep up with. But as other states catch up, they're going to drop it. California just introduced theirs. They didn't have one for a long time because they didn't accept electronic until 2011. So,
Right.
they're moving that date down.
Well, to support Colin's point, with the Brentwood guys here, we're very closely watching a decision in Tennessee that may affect how often we report WC Pauls for them. It could become daily. Now, of course, they put this out there, and then they ask for opinions, and maybe they'll fall somewhere closer to a week, I'm hoping, but if they get their way. Yeah. They're stepping up, so we have to as well. So then, it used to be that you could get away with weekly for Pauls and monthly for unit stat. It might change to, if you write in Tennessee, it's daily. And we watch that, and we kind of keep everyone up to date on it.
And it is like following a moving vehicle.
They
are all changing, and every state's got their opinion, and they change their things. So, if you find out anything before we do, share.
Right.
We'll share with you. That's how it works. It's like what I learned in Pennsylvania, I'm applying to everybody who ever potentially writes in that state. That's just what you got to do. One other thing to piggyback on what you'd mentioned about the deductibles.
Yes.
This has been in the system for a while, but now they're starting to do crits on it, is recovery. Everyone's got recoveries, and it's a good thing in our industry, right? We're getting money back. Now they want to know how that's divvied up. You can't just say, I have a recovery and I'm just going to apply it here. They need to know, and there's a formula. And I took this class, and they make you sit through the formula. Did you take the class when we were there last year? You should. Yeah. There's a formula to split out how much of a recovery you put in each little bucket that you are applying it to. Expense, medical, indemnity. And I'm like, we just send it in one. Whatever the TPA sends us to, whatever the claim system is. Chances are it's going to have to go back to your claims people to do it correctly. Or we're going to have to do something to catch these up, because I'd be willing to bet right now we're all doing it wrong. And no one's getting any crits on it, but they're telling us now they want it.
Right.
So they're teaching it, so that means it's going to become mandatory within a year or two.
Right.
So just put that in your head going, we get a check back. Now it's like, I don't want a recovery. It's too hard to keep that straight.
Well, perfect segue into the final change that I have, which is actually not in effect now. The last update was actually that they were supposed to discuss it in spring of 2017. They did, but obviously it didn't make it in the release, so it's not effective yet. But it's a recovery date. It's a singular field, and this is the one I was telling you where New York wanted an entirely new row. And that's what Colin's talking about, is they want more information. New York wants more information to the point where they're willing to process an entirely new set, whereas everyone else kind of brought that back. But they are going to do it in stages, the first being, currently the way you report a recovery is you report it on the level you're at, and then you kind of put it where you want, going back. Now there's Wisconsin, doesn't let you do that. They have a formula already that's in effect, but then the new formula is coming up, and eventually it will be probably a new record.
Yeah, and that's the other part of that is, obviously in your first report, you never have recovery in there.
Yeah.
God, within a year, no one's written you a check. It takes forever to get that money. They want to know when it happened, and then you have to issue correction reports for all those years that it potentially existed on. So if you didn't have it for like 5 years, but it goes back to 3, you've got to edit 3, 4, 5, and then you're going to do your new report
Right.
for subsequent on 6. It's like, I don't want you to get recoveries because now it's work for me too, right? It's not easy.
Right.
Did you have any more on that, or?
That was it, and that's actually my full list of changes that were in effect this past year and coming up.
Yeah, the other thing, it's not a change, but it's something NCCI is going to start, well, the states are mandating. They're going to start getting very strict on, and that is addresses. Like last year, they got very strict about addresses. They weren't splitting things up and doing anything for you anymore. And names. Now, address linking. You know, this named insured belongs to this address, and maybe there's more than one and all this stuff. It becomes a nightmare for reporting. So that's why, you know, like a lot of you, we've set up, we talk about like locations and connections. And one of the location types we'll say is a named insured. The reason we're kind of steering that way is to say, I at least have a name. I can say this is an insured member, it's a named insured, and I have an address that goes with it. So I go 002, 002. It works, right? But if I just have a named insured record over here and I have no addresses to go with it, I have no way of knowing what to report. And if you're not reporting a name and at least one address, some states are going to start kicking them back.
Right. Well, and of course that hits the road with us with the POC states and.
Yeah, the POC states are the worst ones. And the worst case too, and they went through this in the experiments, if you send it through and you don't line it up properly because you put numbers and you put codes on them, it's like if anyone's used to SQL, it does a join. And you say, oh, I only have 5 locations. It's like, oh, but the state got 100. I'm like, uh-oh. Because it multiplied on every name. And it's like, So if you don't do it right, the state may get none, or it may get 5 times as many as you expected. I think you took that class, right? Didn't you? Yeah, when you go through that, I was doing the oh shit moment in the chair. So, and that does kind of bring up, like every year NCCI does a class. It's free to attend. You just have to get there. There's some really cheap hotels, so it's not even that expensive. They do it in West Palm Beach. It's in January every year, last week of January.
Colin always takes people to dinner that show up.
That's why we go.
So it was fun. That's where we met the long group. We had a great time. But encourage it. It's educational. There's so many classes. Like I said, it's all free. I can't believe NCCI does this for no charge. So until they get wise and start charging, you get meals, everything. You're taken care of for the week.
That too.
Nothing wrong with showing up, right? So.
Well, and in North Carolina, you're actually required to go if you do their financial calls.
Okay.
So there is a statutory reason for it for North Carolina carrier. I qualify for you guys, so don't worry.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
So for anyone else, maybe you can put me down.
Yeah.
I'll qualify for you. We'll keep everyone legal in North Carolina. But it's good. They don't talk about most of the other states, but they do go in pretty heavy and talk about stuff. And they do examples, workbooks, so much documentation. It is like drinking from a fire hose, but it's worth it. So I encourage everyone to attend. I know we ran into a lot of you guys last year, so.
Yeah.
And even if you're not reporting, I'm looking at the SIG people, it can be worth it just to see what they're doing. I went 3 years ago, and WCIRB, which is the rating bureau in California, they sent a contingent.
Oh yes.
It wasn't wise either, because people found out who they were, and it's like, you're from California, we don't like you. Why are you making us do this? Yeah, so they got an earful. Because they were trying to figure out, learn what NCCI does and what they can do better. So a lot of rating bureaus show up. And
Yes.
a lot of big players, people from Zurich, people from all over.
Oh, yeah.
AIG shows up. I mean, so you get some people who are like, oh yeah, we do millions of policies. And I'm like, yeah, we got a couple hundred.
Yeah.
So it's a good show. Well worth it. Any questions before? We got a couple minutes left. Well, our fire
Fire died.
It's an IT fire. Yeah. Yeah, loading.
Fire.
It's been doing that for a while. So just, whenever you get reports, you need help with them, that's what we're here for. Kind of think of it this way, I'll be your first line. If I don't know, I'm going to Steven.
Yeah.
And we'll put you in touch with him. Because, yeah, there's a lot to do. And there's more and more. You know, when they talk about potential, you know, like regulating of work comp, that's what NCCI is stepping in and saying, you don't need to regulate it. We're doing that for you.
Right.
keeping the government's hand out of there by just stepping in the middle. So it's good for us, even though we don't like them.
Yeah.
All right, it is now 11:30. What time is lunch?
Lunch is at 12.
Okay.
Did anybody have any other questions for Colin or Stephen?
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll take another break, and then when they bring out, they're supposed to be here at lunch. Maybe they'll bring out a little early, but then we'll jump into lunch. We got an hour for lunch, and then we'll start.